So we'll move to the manager's report, item 10. Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. We do have an action item tonight on the manager's report, and I'm going to hand this one off to our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker.
Good evening, Mr. Baker.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you, Dave. The motion that you see before you seeks council direction to consider an alternative option for mixed-use redevelopment of the Civic Center. This option would include a new combined police station in Village Hall with a multifamily residential development on the property. Preliminary review of this option suggests that the revenue generated by the private development could be used for village facilities, and the amount of existing village revenues could be reduced to something less than $16 million. This option would provide a sustainable, complete solution for the police station and Village Hall. It is also consistent with comprehensive plan goals and the council discussion of the downtown focus area plan that took place last week. If the motion is approved, further evaluation of this option would take place over the next 3 to 4 months. When the evaluation is finalized, council will then be able to decide whether to proceed with this mixed-use redevelopment option or the option that calls for the renovation and addition to the existing police station. That concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. And I'll just add a little bit more context. This is obviously a long-running challenge that is solving once and for all the facilities puzzle of both Village Hall and the police station. And it's taken some twists and turns over the last decade or so. One thing that I've said before, and I'll say again, is I think it's very important that we come to a conclusion on this, because unlike wine, this isn't getting better with time. Number two, there are some economic environments, such as our ability to access funds at favorable rates, is not going to stay the way it is forever. It was disappointing that we couldn't achieve a complete solution the last time we talked about this. So I'm very intrigued about pursuing this. Number one, because it would be a complete solution. Number two, it would be in the cost range of what we were talking about before. And yet, I think would also be consistent with what all of us saw when we sat down and started doing our downtown comprehensive plan review, which was what really is the best use of the space that this campus is sitting on. And it's probably not a fleet garage, a old ball bearing factory, and a police station that, with all due respect, probably would look out of place on the set of Dragnet. And if we can put this to a better use, come up with a complete solution for our facilities challenges, and yet still do it in what, by recent measures, was a perfectly acceptable cost, managing the risk and dealing with some of the other issues about location and whatnot, I think is something that definitely is worth pursuing. Understanding we're not making a decision and committing ourselves to this path tonight, it's simply, as I understand it, we've gotten some very positive preliminary indications, but it's going to take a little bit more work and effort to see if it's really going to pan out. We want to kick the tires a little bit more, so to speak. I don't see why we wouldn't want to do that. So personally, this is something that I think I've played with this Rubik's Cube more than once, and I like the way this one is going and would like to solve this puzzle once for all. And so far, everything I'm hearing is very positive and I think very encouraging. I don't know what others' thoughts are. Commissioner White?
Okay. Well, first let me say that having reviewed this, I consider the current proposal to have at least 2 very significant advantages over the proposal that was discussed in the fall of 2014, a proposal I opposed then, and I would continue to oppose something like that. The 2 significant advantages are that if it were to be determined that the TIF financing mechanism is viable and does work, then I see a real possibility to solve this problem without adding to a homeowner's tax bill. Early this evening, we heard the village manager say this is the 6th year where we've not raised property taxes for operations. My takeaway from the referendum is that the community does not want to see an increase on their tax bill for the purposes of building a village hall. So I would not likely, I mean, that's something I had to take very strongly into account when it came time to fund it. So therefore, I'm very intrigued by this idea. The second, in some ways, maybe less important, maybe not less important, is I believe our community is very much better off with Packey Webb located on that little location on Ogden Avenue instead of a police station, I think, in the long run. So for those 2 reasons, I think this is very definitely a step forward, something I'm definitely looking at seeing more. There are some concerns, though, about escalating commitment, and I know certain other council members may speak in a minute. There's some concern that, you know, we don't start a process of saying a number of small yeses in a row and then find ourselves feeling obligated to go all the way through. And some of them have to do with how many of these large-sized buildings do we really want in the downtown. I think there's 4 that's been approved, and this would be the 5th. I think we're talking, maybe they can correct me about this, we're in the neighborhood of 350 approved units so far, more or less between 300 and 400 somewhere. This would add another 300, so we're getting a little over 600 approved units. You know, personally, I'm comfortable that that's the way we should go at this point, but I don't want us to go forward unless we have full consensus of the entire council, because I don't want this to be a matter of conflict. I want it to be something where we can all agree and everyone feels comfortable they've had a chance to fully understand. I'm very interested in looking into this, understanding this process. I think this might be a way. We have to make sure that the numbers work. But I know I've spoken to other council members this afternoon who may wish to speak, and I want to be very clear that even if I personally wanted to go forward, I wanted to make sure that we go forward with consensus.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other thoughts, members of the council? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. Point of fact, the prior plan to which Commissioner White referred actually did include redoing the TIF downtown. I'm thrilled to have an option before us that we can pursue that would completely solve the facilities challenge. Taking care of the police station was priority 1, and it remains priority 1. But we have a lot of challenges here in this building. As Mayor noted, it was a ball bearing factory to begin with, and the village moved into it on a temporary basis. I've said this before, around the time Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. It's about time to end that temporary residence. I'm also intrigued by the opportunity to do it without a tax increase and to do it within the budget that we have already set forth. And I love the idea of being able to unlock some of the economic potential of this land here in such a prime spot in our downtown. I think it would be a shame to not explore this fully, and I'm looking forward to supporting this plan. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other thoughts or questions at this time on the motion, Commissioner?
Yeah. Boy, things changed fast, because I went out of town and I came back, and all of a sudden we're considering something again, and I was fully taken aback, quite honestly, at the 180-degree turn from where we were going. That being said, not everything I'm seeing is something I dislike. However, I have great concerns about putting another 300 condo units on, not to mention building the village hall and everything else, but another 300 condo units in before we know what we've already approved is, what we know is going in. That's about 350 units. What kind of impact that's going to have on downtown, in traffic, in people, in all kinds of things. Whether or not these units are actually going to sell, I feel like this is kind of coming fast and going too fast, and I can see getting the environmental report. That I would be okay with, but I am nowhere near thinking about publishing a call to offers or hiring TIF consultants. I need to have more information.
Fair questions, and I want to reiterate, at least from my perspective, that we're not making any final decisions here about whether to do or not, but part of this is in order to get more information. So what I would ask is, if there's other specific types of information that you would want, let's get those as quickly as everything else, so we can make a decision. My fear is...
You can't, because what I want is a year. What I want is a year to see how everything we're building now is playing out.
If the question is, let me jump ahead, because one of the things you mentioned was parking, and we've heard that with every development that we've done. What about parking? What about parking? What about parking? A fair question. And I think we've said, and some of us have had conversations with members of the public, and some of us have had conversations one-on-one. There's no question about it that parking is something we're going to have to address. And I want to be very clear. We're not going to simply close our eyes to parking and put more people in downtown and address it. I fully expect, in fact, I know that soon, I believe even early next year as part of our next process, we're going to be looking at adding parking to the downtown. We have to.
Okay, but I don't remember saying parking, so I remember saying traffic, but not parking.
Well,
Maybe I
but those
did.
two go hand in hand, because the traffic has to go somewhere when it visits your downtown, and that's typically parking. Parking we can address, and along with that goes traffic. So my question is, I don't know if we can ever have the answer to these questions, because the only way to know for sure is to do it. I'm fairly confident, given projects that were undertaken a decade ago, that we were able to address them in stride, and I'm confident that this and future councils could do that again. My fear is that, number one, we have just kicked this around way too long. It's become irresponsible, and we can't wait another year, and then another year, and another year, and another year. That is totally unacceptable. We can't be afraid to do things because there's always going to be something we don't know. I think what we need to do is get sufficient, a responsible amount of information about our current situation, and then make a decision. And that's where I'm at. I'm not suggesting we don't get more information, and I'm not certainly committing to any particular plan yet, but I certainly want to know more about how this plays out, because this seems to address a lot of the concerns that I heard last time. Location, risk, some of the things that Commissioner White mentioned. And that's why I'm very much in favor of it, because it seems to address all those issues. Parking, traffic are always going to be issues. They've been an issue with everything we've ever done with any project, going back to Station Crossing, going back to Morningside, going back to Jordan Courts. That's always been an issue, and I'm confident that we'll address them in due course. In terms of bringing more residents downtown, that is something that I absolutely think we have to do. It's consistent with the trend of development, not just in the area, but in the Chicago metropolitan area. I could go on and on and on about why workforce housing and new urbanism and walkable communities and putting more people close to our merchants and millennials. I won't go into that right now, but I think that is something that where we have a reasonable opportunity to do something, and particularly when the economic and financial environment is as favorable as it is right now. Yes, it probably is a window that we need to operate within, but I'm very comfortable at least sticking my head out the window to see what's outside. I'm not necessarily jumping through the window yet.
I don't, and I'm very well aware of new urbanism and TODs and all of the planning that goes along with all of this, and why you want people in your downtown, and what you want in your downtown, and how you want to put it in your downtown. I don't want to be the community that overdeveloped too fast and then has lots of vacant units sitting on property, and you know, kind of regretting what they did, especially when it's sitting on our land.
As a point of order about our process this evening, I don't believe any of us have sufficient information to make a final decision. So one of my questions for staff is, in the event there were a positive vote this evening, when would be the next decision point for council? When would they next vote on something?
There are several steps that would take place before we got the actual offers in front of the council. Let's start with the major question of yes or no to proceed, or which plan to proceed. That would be in front of the council likely in February. In advance of that, the council would see several contracts come forward that would prepare us for the call for offers and to get other questions answered. For example, and these are all outlined in the staff report, authorizing an extension of the contract with our architect. They would be helping us draw a site plan to be included in the call for offer. Preparing a survey, a plat of survey of the Civic Center property. Preparing an environmental report. All of that would go into the call for offers. Many of those actions will likely require village council vote in the form of approving a contract with a consultant. Also, the hiring of a TIF consultant to make sure that our TIF revenue projections, or the revenue generated from the private sector development and captured for this use is projected properly and integrated into our financial plan. So that contract may also exceed $15,000. All of those things would come to the council between now and February. Ultimately, February timeline would be the decision point of what step to take next.
If there were an affirmative vote this evening, what would happen between now and our next vote?
We would begin going out to get those contracts prepared, the plat of survey, the environmental report, the extension of the architect's contract, and the preparation of the site plan, all in an effort to create what's called a call for offer, similar to a request for proposals. All that would take place in the next 30 days.
Thank you for that clarification. So yes, it does require moving forward with some things, but there are a number of steps that would have to take place. There are certain, there are certainly milestones that have to be reached before we would be committed. That being said, I think in all fairness, we have to be in favor of moving forward into this realm. It's not something that if there's obviously no interest in doing, we would consider, but I think that there's sufficient compelling reasons to look into this. The only other thing I just want to add is that with any undertaking, there's always something that you have to address, which I fully appreciate. And I guess what I'm trying to say is to my colleagues and to the public is that that's fully understood and appreciated, and it's something that we'll address.
I would just like to add, Mayor, that if the council decides not to authorize the staff to take these next steps as outlined in the motion, then we would go back to implementing the plan as it currently exists, which would also require an extension of the architect's contract, a plat of survey preparation, and an environmental report. Now, those scopes of those contracts would change slightly, but those things will still come forward no matter which plan or option the council derives.
Understood. Appreciate that clarification.
Where I'm at on this is I'm not comfortable that I believe there's many council members that don't feel that they have adequate information to make an intelligent, informed decision. Hasn't been sufficiently briefed on that. Rather than talking in circles about what we know and what we don't know, what consequence would there be if we revisited this matter on November 1st and saw where we're at?
I would take that as the delay in the implementation of the current plan as well.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. The idea is that basically, yeah.
Well, let me ask the question, what's going to happen between now and November 1st? What's going to tell us anything more than what we know now?
Well, you've been working on this for about 12 years or more. Others haven't. Others have been here maybe 12 weeks. If that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But my point is, I don't know of any concrete information that we're going to get between now and November 1st that's going to help in this decision. We're going to be having the same conversation on November 1st. What I understand is that there are some long-term potential impacts to this that I think are fairly identified. But I think what I'm saying is I acknowledge that and am committed to addressing them. Parking and traffic being the two ones that were mentioned. In terms of whether they're going to sell or not, I think that's part of what we're going to find out in the very information that we're trying to get. What does the TIF analysis say? As part of that TIF analysis, my understanding is we're going to get some of that very information about what is the market going to support? What is the, is this a good use for the land? Because it goes into the very economics of it. So these are kind of things where I want to have that information too, and I think we need to pursue some of this in order to get the very information that I think some of us need, and all of us need in order to make the decision. I'm just concerned if we just wait, then we're not going to be any further off than we are right now.
If there were an affirmative vote this evening, what financial obligations, how much money would the village spend between now and when we next talked about it?
As opposed to what we would otherwise spend if we were proceeding with the other plan.
You know, we plan on spending whatever the cost of these next 3 contracts are. I don't have a specific number here, $30,000 to $50,000. If we were directed to be on hold, we wouldn't spend any of it.
Exactly.
If we were directed to continue with the current plan, the scope of each of these things would be reduced dramatically. Many of them would likely not be above $15,000. It would be handled at the staff level to implement the current plan. The architect's contract would come back for the current plan, which would be measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we would start going down that road.
But But certain things, I'll just say that if we do not have a current survey of this building, that's something I think we should have. You know, if the most recent survey may have been when the village acquired the building 40 years ago or something, you know, we do need a current survey one way or the other. So I'm not particularly concerned about paying for a survey. And I'm not particularly concerned about paying for soil borings or environmental report. That's something that we kind of need to know.
Yeah, the thing about the environmental reports is they have about a 180-day shelf life if you want to use them for development purposes. So it'd be fine for us, but if we got those plans and then hesitated, we have to do them over again.
Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. We're at this point because of about a decade, certainly, Mayor, when you were last up here prior to being mayor, about a decade's worth of really diligent financial stewardship by village councils of past. It put us into a position of having, as somebody referred to, 6 years worth of pretty much flat taxes, but not only that, being in really rock-solid financial condition, making borrowing easy and borrowing rates easy, or at least lower than they might otherwise be. I think it would be a dereliction of duty if we would not pull this thread far enough to find out the answers to some of these questions. What is being solicited, as my understanding from staff tonight, is some general direction about whether this potential plan is of interest to us, so that they can properly frame up the contracts for architectural work and soil work and survey work. If that plan is not of any interest to us, that's an easy enough answer. I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. The idea that we would make all those improvements, both in taxable parcels, meaning a developed space, new facilities for police and village hall, for, at least in theory and on the back of a napkin at this stage, for no tax increase, and not consider doing it is kind of, I just don't even understand where that comes from. The point of this is that at any stage along the way, any of these reports could give us information that says, yeah, this is really a bad idea. But none of us are going to know that. None of the 7 of us up here. What we're talking about doing is letting planners in National Planning Month and engineers and architects go down and do their work. And I'd really like to do that post haste. I don't want to wait 1 month. I don't want to wait 1 year. I want to get that information. We may find out come November, December, January that we've got soil problems and we've got engineering and site design problems that make this an impossibility. Fine, let's find it out now. I don't see any value other than interest rate risk or market saturation risk in waiting. So I would encourage us to move forward with checking into this stuff. That's exactly what we're asking tonight. Not are we going to build it, not is there going to be a traffic problem, not is there going to be a parking problem. We're asking, should we do the research necessary to decide if it's viable or not?
Thank you, Commissioner. We haven't actually had a motion or a second yet, have we? Sorry. It's under the manager's report. It's a little looser. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Driving forces for me is 2 years ago we had almost 2 years ago we had a referendum. The question was, where are we going to spend $46 million or over for facilities? The answer should be no. People wanted to improve the police station as soon as possible and didn't want to move the village facilities to Ogden Avenue because that would drive up the cost, and a lot of people didn't want to change location, but basically money was the driving force. So this far we avoided moving the facilities to Ogden Avenue. I'm concerned about, still concerned about the cost, and the question I have is, and I'm sure it's probably the case that the police facilities can withstand still another delay. I would like to avoid that delay, and the cost of that was around $15 million, give or take. So one of the questions I would have would be, what would happen if we went ahead with the building the police facilities? In addition to the questions that you're going to be asking architects and getting the layouts and that, is what would happen if we went ahead with the police station, and how that would affect the offers and the layout for the rest of the facilities. Mm-hmm. Also, I still And I think one of the nice, I agree, you know, there's some advantages to waiting on the Village Hall portion because of the concerns that Commissioner Earl had, and also the possibility that maybe we could change locations, or and the location, I don't know, you know, there's a lot to talk about from the retreat we had. There's problems with the library facility. There's parking problems. Maybe if we would move a Village Hall over there, or maybe if they brought the library over here, you know, just having options to look at. I'm sure when I say change locations, I'm not talking Ogden Avenue, and I'm not talking Main Street, but maybe in the library parking lot, maybe there's a way to resolve problems there. And the last thing I'm very concerned about is the expenditure of, you know, right now we're at about $15 million. I want to avoid the $46 million, and sure, we're talking about a TIF. We had a downtown TIF that, quite honestly, we were sweating out for most of its life, and it really didn't come into its own until maybe, what, the last 2 years with the plans. And I don't want to do things that would obligate our taxpayers to get us to that $46 million. If it can be resolved by a TIF, maybe, you know, I would consider it, as long as we can keep it out of the pockets of the taxpayers. I'm sure they'd love the idea, but you know, how much risk is involved? So I'm looking for partners. I'm looking for possible, you know, options on location. And in that sense, partnering with other entities that we've been talking about for a long time, whether it's schools, parks, library, whoever, reduce the cost and maybe make our Village Hall a better location. You know, not just a place where you come to meetings, or you stop in and get a permit, or pay a water bill or whatever. So those are the concerns I have right now, and I'd like to see addressed. And you know, I hate the idea of delaying helping the police department. You know, we promised the public we'd do that, and kind of leery about waiting. But you know, if it'll help us in the long run, I'll get that out. You know, I could be for it. Looking at the list of, you know, when you were talking about, okay, we're talking about 45, 50,000 to find out things that we probably need to know anyway. And I don't know, bringing it up till February again kind of scares me, but so be it. And it seems like the other members of the council are willing to do that, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other thoughts? Commissioner Wallace?
Thank you, Mayor. I obviously have not been around for the amount of time that everyone else up here has been. And I've been mulling this over in my mind since Monday. And while I see a lot of advantages to looking into this further, I'm struggling with a couple things. One being that there's not a consensus here with the council, and also with the issue of people not wanting a new Village Hall about a year and a half ago. So those are a couple things that I'm struggling with, and I agree with Commissioner Earl and her concerns about traffic in the downtown area, units being sold, and things of that nature. So I'm seeing benefits and disadvantages to going with this, but I would love if we were all at a consensus, and I don't think that that's the situation right now.
Thank you. Well, the only thing we're talking about right now, is to be perfectly clear, is whether to get some more information. And yes, that information is going to come at a cost. And my concern is that if there's a reluctance to undertake the cost to get the information, then we're never going to get the answers that some of us seem to want to have, and all of us should have. We're not talking about committing to an alternative plan. We're talking about really getting some of the information that I understand is being identified as absent. And if what I'm hearing is I don't want to get any more information, I don't want to know the answer to these things, just forget it, we'll kick the can down the road for Village Hall some other day, you know, and so be it, that's the direction. Then let's get a shovel in the ground, build a police station, and stop this conversation, because all we're doing is wasting time.
No, I see part of the concern would be perhaps described as escalating commitment. That we agree this evening to spend this money, and then, well, you agreed to do the study, why didn't you say then you were against it? So the point is, I think if we do go forward, it has to be very clear that if any council member uses the spending of this money as some type of sunk cost that leverages the project, that's out of bounds.
I don't know who up here would do that. That was so sinister, probably would have been a good idea if somebody had thought of it. I can also tell you that in the last 15 years, I've seen things go much further than this, and people have changed their direction. Happens all the time, because there are going to be multiple contracts and multiple votes, and there has to be an affirmative vote on each step of the process before you actually jump out of the plane. So if there's any sense that this is somehow a tipping point tonight, I want to dissuade everyone of that notion. And that I can assure you from having been here for a long, long time, I've seen many projects where either new information or new input has changed the ultimate outcome.
That
happens all the time.
With that understanding,
I've even changed my mind once or twice.
With that understanding, a number of the things that are being invested in can be used in a variety of different ways, and don't commit to any one course of action. And I will say that whatever the decision is this evening, my personal opinion as to what the best course for the village is going to be will also be tempered by a sense that we need to have consensus on the council. That I don't think this, I think if we were to go forward this on a 4-3 vote or something, I think that'd be a very bad thing down the road. So I think it would be, we need self-education in the meantime so that we can have a final go, no-go decision that has consensus. I think otherwise we're asking for trouble.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. I'm going to take a step back and make sure that we are getting enough information so that everyone can make an informed vote. But I don't think we're even at a point tonight where we could do that. I certainly don't have the answers to the questions I have. I'm in a little bit of a voyage of discovery here. I want to get the information in order to have a discussion with my colleagues and with the public to try to reach consensus. And right now, some of the questions being asked, I don't know the answer. I want to get the answer so I can have an informed conversation. Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're losing track of when it is that we need to have a consensus. We don't need a consensus now. What we need is information. And the only way we're going to get that information is by moving forward now. If at some point we get the environmental report, or the TIF consultant report, or the call for offers comes back, and
we
it
don't
turns
like
out we don't like any of them, then we throw it all out and we move forward with the plan for just the police station. The point at which we need a consensus one way or the other is in February, after we've gotten all of the information so that we can make a informed decision. The time for a consensus isn't now. We're not deciding anything. We're deciding to get information. We're not deciding to pick a plan. That's not on the schedule until February of next year. That's the point that we need to develop that consensus. Thanks.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Yeah, well, when I looked at the schedule, I was, here we are kicking the can, another study, another this, another that, and now it's going to be February. So, but I can go along with that. As we get into the offers and submissions and plans and that, I still would like to know the effect of having the police station, going with the plan that we have for the police station now, what that would do to the rest of the campus. And is it really better, what's the difference if we put off putting the police station where it is and having that plan? Option 1, option 2. Build the police station, what do we get? Not building it, making part of the campus, village hall, new police station, what that would be. And that I think would be worth knowing.
Sure, and not just to clarify that, what I understood part of that request to be is if you went ahead with the current proposal on the police station and did the project where it stands today, what options would that remove from the table with respect to going forward? Because
usually, when you state my purpose correctly, you do it quite well.
Well, that's a very important question, and one that is forefront of my mind, because if someone could ask, well, why don't we just go forward to the police station and we can monkey around with all this other stuff later? And my understanding from our previous conversation is because of the location of where the current police station is, it would, my understanding is, but subject to confirmation, everything's subject to confirmation, it would eliminate our ability to do some of the things that we could do if it were just simply kept in the same general vicinity, but not smack dab in the middle of the parcel. And I think that's why we want to explore this option.
The answer to that comes from Letton Williams.
Well-
Consider a slightly different scope.
Well, correct, and that's what I want to know, that's what I want to learn, that's what I want to find out. And part of this also is, I think we owe it to ourselves to make a little bit of an investment to find out what would be the path not taken. So that if we don't take it, we can look the community in the eye and say, well, yes, we didn't do this because A, B, C, and D. And right now, I couldn't look the public in the eye and say, why aren't I pursuing this proposal? I don't know yet. There may be very good reasons not to. To go back to what Commissioner Jose said, all we're trying to achieve right now is a agreement to go forward to get some more information so that we can have a conversation and hopefully reach consensus one way or the other come February, is the way I see this. So why don't we do this? Why don't I ask for a motion, and then we can get a second and then have more conversation if necessary. So is there a motion to direct staff to pursue an alternative option for a mixed-use redevelopment of the Civic Center property as was described?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
With the understanding that part of the Williams architecture study is going to be to evaluate the impact of completing the police station with the previously approved plan, the impact that would have on the future development of it, have that be part of the report. You know, then that's a piece of information I think would be very helpful to have us make a decision about going forward.
Can I just clarify,
Yeah.
just because I'm not sure we're on the same page with the staff here. We're hearing that a report that looks at options, when we were going down a path of a call for offers, it would be very difficult, I think, to do a call for offers with such a widespread in the concept of what's actually for sale or not. So if we want to understand and flesh out in more detail the impact of investing $14.5 million in the police station in its current location under the current plan, then I would like to take that as an interim step. Let's do that report and study first, then come back. But I think it would be challenging to go straight to a call for offers with two alternative bids, if you will, that were so dramatically different.
No, well, hold on a second. I didn't view that as an alternative bid. I think what Commissioner Waldeck was simply asking is more clarification on what obstacles does that create to have a police station smack dab in the middle of a development site. And one could say it's obvious because it takes a parcel out of play that otherwise would be in play, and it reduces flexibility and therefore the attractiveness of the overall project. But that's just me speaking. I think we can get that information without, I don't want to speak for Commissioner Waldeck, but I don't think you were asking for bid A and bid B.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify. Do we want a report, or what are we looking for on that?
I think what I was suggesting is let's get the information we were asking for, but as part of that process, either staff or our architect or Williams or whoever can say, oh, by the way, if you have a cistern in the middle of your yard, it's going to affect where you can put the footprint of your house.
Yeah, so the basic answer to that is it cuts the development opportunities in half, creates significant challenges in site planning, and likely drives the revenue from the sale and TIF from this property by less than half. It would be a significant impact.
See, I think the point of my comment was, especially for council members who have not dealt with this before, to be able to see and review that documentation so that they understand that there's a solid factual basis
Right.
for having reached that conclusion.
Absolutely.
Right, so that would be, I hear you, Commissioner White, asking for a report with some sketch site plans that show the impact on how the call for offer will be put together.
Basically visualizing what you just said so
Okay.
that it can be
Got it.
understood by everyone, including those who have not been steeped in it for some time, whether they're sitting up here or they're in the audience.
Right, so I just want to make sure that I understood. So if that's the motion, then it would be a motion to direct staff to work with the architect to prepare a site plan that shows two options? I just want to make sure.
I don't think that my view was the motion hadn't changed. What I understood is Commissioner Waldeck just wanting a little bit more detail around why that is the case. And as long as Commissioner Waldeck was getting that information, which is basically a visualization with drawings of what you described verbally, that should be shared with our newer members of the council so they can actually see what you're talking about.
Well, I guess the issue is Commissioner Waldeck comfortable moving forward without that report? I mean, does he just want that in addition to? or,
The mo-
because we won't
I-
move forward.
No,
The
I-
motion that was made was the motion that was
Yeah.
here. And what is normally the case is there, whether it's a green sheet item on a Friday or any item that comes before us, which this would at some point, there are council questions to it that need answer. One of the elements is, what's the impact of that? Now, whether you guys answer that, or Williams writes a note for you, or whatever.
We'll
it's-
treat
Right.
that as a
Yes.
question regardless.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
the way I understood it.
Can you build a 300
Yes.
or 125 or whatever with a police station sitting there?
Okay, got it, thank you.
The concern I have is the motion, I don't know, maybe I'm being too picky, or motion to direct staff to pursue an alternative option is kind of forceful, when what we're really going for is additional information. Is that too strong, or, am I being too picky?
Well, I think neither.
We really don't want them to pursue an alternative option, we really want to review an alternative or not pursue it, I guess.
I think, fair enough. I think oftentimes the names of our motions are truncated because we don't try to write referendum questions, but I understand your point, and I'll make it very clear. I think the conversation here tonight has made it very clear that an aye vote on this motion would be taking the steps necessary to get the information that's outlined in the manager's report to bring back to the council to then discuss and reach a decision one way or the other in conjunction with input from the public as to whether or not to actually go forward with such a plan.
And it would,
I want to be very clear about
the
that.
ultimate deliverable of this motion would be calls for offers. We would bring back offers.
Yes.
Actual
Right.
written offers.
Yes, we
with
could then study.
specific dollars amount
and
and a
act
financing
upon
plan.
if we
right.
chose to. If we look at them and we find out that they're not satisfactory, or they're not financially appropriate, or any number of reasons.
And there's steps along the way,
we can
not
stop.
unlike, I mean, we had I'm not speaking totally out of school, but we were awfully close to a deal with Aldi at one point on Ogden Avenue 2.5 years ago. And it didn't shake out because we couldn't come to a point of agreement. Everybody was trying. And so as these things come forward, you could have, for instance, an environmental report that made staff come back and say, you know what, they're not doing any calls for offer because of what we found. You're going to have some things. Well, maybe Williams gets into it and says, not on 7 acres, but we're going to work towards that as a goal. And there's at least a half a dozen opportunities to stop along the way.
Yes, and history has indicated that has
There may be
happened.
one or two, not half a dozen.
I see at least 4.
Once we have offers from potential
No,
from
no,
investors.
no, Bill,
saying
the-
we're willing to offer X and it's a written contract signed, we don't have 5 or 6 opportunities.
Well, the motion that's before us would start with an architect's work.
Hold on.
Would start with architect's work. That's opportunity 1. They could come back and say it doesn't fit. The second
But
thing,
we have the opportunity to change course.
our staff is going to be, all right.
I'm not comfortable going forward with calls for offer until we talk about it one more time. I want the information so we can make a decision whether to ask the development community for written contracts. I don't want the credibility of this village extended by having certain council members who haven't been here said, well, don't worry, it's not a problem, and then the development community gives us a signed, written, binding offer, and then they're like, wait a minute, stop, that's bad for the credibility of the community. So I want a chance to vote one more time before we extend a solicitation for a binding written offer, and I want to gather the information needed so that this council can reach consensus on whether to ask for binding written offers.
We would, if this motion is approved, as stated, we would do that. We'll bring it back. We'll take that as direction either way. We'll bring it
That's
back in
fine.
November.
So moved.
Fine, that's fine.
Already, second.
It's already on.
Right.
And nobody's comments tonight will be held against them in a court of law or otherwise.
So could you tell me what I would be agreeing to then?
Sure, let's be very clear, and I'm going to guess that, Mr. Fieldman, you probably have an idea, so rather than my trying to summarize it,
That's probably best, actually.
If this motion passes tonight, the village staff will take actions necessary to prepare calls for offers, including an extension of the contract with Williams Architect, the preparation of a plat of survey for the Civic Center property, the preparation of an environmental report, the preparation of soil borings. We would gather all that information with a draft call for offer before it is published, bring all that information back to the council and look for final direction of whether an offer, call for offer is published.
So you're saying the first 4, and then a draft of the prepare and publish call for offers, which is the 5th item on your list.
Yes.
So we would be approving the first 4 and getting back a draft of number 5.
That's correct. Staff may recommend getting the TIF consultant on board, as we may need to understand a little bit more of TIF work and its impact on our financing plan that may or may not be included in the call for offers.
That actually might be very important. That's something I'm
Yeah.
very interested in knowing.
And
So
how
we're down
much,
to the TIF.
and how much are you anticipating this is going to cost us, these first 4 things?
Well, each of them could be, the extension of Williams Architects, probably $50,000. However, if we proceed with the current plan, that would not be wasted money, it would just shift direction.
Okay.
The Plata survey, $20,000. And I'm pausing to see if Mr. Baker's going to interrupt any of these things.
Okay.
Environmental report, $25,000, $30,000. Less than that. So what we would do then is, if they're over 15, they come back to the council anyway.
Right. And let me just throw one other thing out. Let's assume that we weren't even talking about this, we were just going forward with the current plan to expand and renovate the police station. We still have on the table what to do with the rest of the campus and the village hall, so I'm assuming some of this information would be valuable to that anyway.
Yes.
This is one of the reasons why I think it's very important to get this information, because even if we don't do this at all and we go with the current plan, we still haven't solved the equation for village hall. We're still going to know the answers to some of these questions. So I think we need to know them anyway.
Well, my opinion is that a pause and another vote before actually soliciting offers is more consistent with what was said on the dais this evening. And to the extent that they may help us build consensus, I think in the long run, that'll be a very good way to do it.
There will be another vote before anything gets published.
Okay.
Okay, now everyone's heads are shaking. Questions from the audience on the motion? No one would dare. Aye. If there are comments on the motion, I'm not looking for comments, I'm asking you for comments.
I'm going to take a bite of the apple.
I think it's more of a dragon fruit, but.
Well, what the heck?
Good evening, welcome.
I'm all dressed up, I may as well stand up here. Hi, Rich Calavani, 6825 Camden. When I first heard about this, I don't know, a couple months ago, I thought, wow, what a simple yet elegant solution. We had the issue where the police station was going to cost about $14 million, and it still didn't solve the problem of this facility, and when were we going to look into that? And the whole idea of sinking $30,000 or $50,000 strikes me as being a lot more reasonable than sinking $14,000 and putting a permanent block there. We just don't have that flexibility. So in my mind, as a citizen, I think it makes perfect sense to come up with reasonable options that you people can put your brain power against. Look at that and say, does it make sense to go with the plan we already in place, or do we have a larger plan? And then the whole idea of when you want to buy something and have someone else pay for it, that just strikes me as being a very positive thing to do. So I agree with it.
Thank you, appreciate the comments. Any other questions or comments on the motion that is pending? All right, then. I'm going to call for the roll, please, on the motion.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, motion passes unanimously, and I think we all look forward to the information. Obviously, a lot of questions, and there'll be more conversation on this. Anything else under the manager's report?
That is the manager's report tonight, Mayor.
That's
Thank
it?
you.